What up, good people? Welcome to Lightning Round Podcast. Jamie, Craig, and myself here to break down interior defensive linemen. So Jamie and I and Craig each have two guys we're each going to talk about. We got six, and then we each got a little sleeper that we want to each talk about. So we'll get to that. So there's probably going to be about 9 guys we'll cover today. We appreciate all you draft nerds for joining us. Craig, welcome back.
Absolutely, fellas. Happy to be back for round 2. Let's get it done.
Jamie, how you feeling?
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Good. Had to switch the boxes there. All right, cool. And anybody watching this and want to know our side of the Drew Tranquil situation, you got a podcast coming very soon. All right. So with that note, let's move on. Interior defensive lineman. We'll start with Jamie. And of course, he's going to talk about the top defensive tackle here. This is a guy that a lot of people have as a top 5, if not one of the best in this class, in this 2023 class. It is Jalen Carter out of Georgia. Jamie, let's talk about him.
So, yeah, in this group of short straws, I drew the long straw to start. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
How did I get screwed out of that? Because Craig's got one coming up too.
You made the list, and I somehow got the best guy to start. So I appreciate that. So Carter, I mean, everybody knows who Jalen Carter is. You've seen him play in the national championship game twice already in his career. He is a monster. 6'4", I think, 320 some odd pounds. He's got the length that you look for. He's got the athleticism that you look for. There is a lot to like about Jalen Carter. Excuse me. The first thing is he plays up and down the line of scrimmage. He played some 1 and 0 technique in 2021. You see him play some 3 technique, some 4-eye, which is over the inside shoulder of the guard, some 5 technique. He is up and down the line of scrimmage, and he can handle all those jobs equally well. He understands blocking schemes. He understands how to deconstruct, handle and deconstruct double teams. Carter is very capable of controlling guards with one arm, peeking into the backfield and getting into either gap to finish plays. He uses a club move, which is really his go-to move. For if you don't know what a club move is, it's where you kind of swat the shoulder and move somebody out of the way, and he swats guys with the club move, and they kind of go jelly and they move out of his way. It's a very effective move. He also uses his hands very well to soften the edge. You'll see him running stunts and twists, kind of working his hands to keep himself clean and working around the edge. Very light on his feet. He bends almost like an edge, not quite, but almost. Capable of winning with a swim move. He has an arm over and a bull rush as well. Hands are really good. He, like I said, he has the bend that you like. He has lateral quickness. It's great. He can flatten the edge and close on the ball carrier. He can sometimes get overextended. There are times where he tries to go full bull rush and he'll lean into a block and lose his balance and get pulled off balance at times. Not a huge problem, but it's there. And it usually happens when he doesn't win early off the snap. He'll get stuck on the block and guys will pull him off balance. He did spend more time on the ground than I would have expected, particularly in 2022. He didn't have the huge jump in production that you would have expected. In 2021, he was more of a rotational player because they had Devontae Wyatt and Davis on playing defensive tackle. He was the guy in the middle of that line in 2022, and his numbers for 2022 looked almost exactly like they did in 2021. There wasn't a huge jump with the increase in snaps, which is a little concerning for a guy who's getting some of the run that he's getting. And I think the rush counters are a little limited. When the go-tos don't work, when the swim doesn't work, when the club doesn't work, he can get stuck. To me, I think really Carter is a guy, he can play in a 1-gap system. He can play in a 2-gap system. You can play him at nose. I don't really think that's where you want him. I think you want to teach him to rush the passer, teach him counters, and unleash him as an interior rusher. I think he's probably better suited to play somewhere in the 3 technique to 5 technique range, where he can line up on the inside shoulder in a gap and use his quickness to split double teams and beat guys inside. He is, we'll get to the rankings in a bit, but he is my number one defensive tackle. I have an 87 on him, very high on him. He didn't get a first round grade. My guess he's probably still going to wind up with a top 5 or top 10 pick in this class based on what we've seen so far. But very high on him. He's a guy who's going to land somewhere and be extremely productive, probably has an all pro level ceiling. You have to talk about some of the legal stuff, which I'm sure we'll get to as the guys get into it. It's not something that we're grading on, but it is something teams have to dig into and understand as they consider drafting him.
Yeah. So the red flags are, just add on before Craig gets in here. Earlier this month, he was arrested on reckless driving and racing charges. Throughout his time in college, he had a lingering ACL injury. And at his pro day, he came in weighing 9 pounds heavier than teams expected. He did not take part in any workouts. And it seems like his stock is starting to drop.
Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of piggybacking a little bit off of what Jamie said in regards to him. You don't want to waste this guy's talent to gapping him. He definitely needs to be a penetrator, and I would absolutely love to see him lined up in the 3 or 5 at the next level consistently. That's where he's going to live and make his bread. We're talking about a dude who in a class last year was teammates with Jordan Davis. And I mean, he stood out. Like when you watch tape last year, you're looking at this kid like, who's this guy? And they also would just take your attention away from Davis, which says a lot because you're talking about a complete mountain of a human being that he was lined up next to. But he made the splashier plays. Absurd athlete, former basketball player, and I believe he was a competitive weightlifter as well. One of the things that is very evident on tape is guards on skates almost immediately on the snap. Like if your weight isn't distributed properly, just get ready to moonwalk because it's going to end up being a really poor rep for you. And there's going to be pressure on the quarterback almost immediately. And he's just one of those dudes who just kind of knows he's that guy. So he'll just line up and sometimes he won't even have a plan. He just knows that he can out athlete you and he'll use that to his advantage. And he won a lot of his reps just really off of being the better athlete. With that said, just some of the things that I noticed that aren't necessarily knocks, but use this phrase at work all the time. It's a nice way to say you need to get better. Areas of opportunity. So he doesn't consistently anchor down against double teams or split them all that often. I think he has a hard time defining angles at times and using his athleticism to his advantage, kind of make things a little bit more difficult on guys keying on him in double team situations. And sometimes he gets into like these 2-step dance revolution battles instead of like firing off the line of scrimmage immediately. So he'll come and pop straight up out of his stance. And like Jamie mentioned, if he doesn't win with that first move, sometimes he'll just throttle it down and he'll play patty cake a little bit. But outside of that, he's the dude in this class. I think he's pretty much head above everyone else. And I have him with a 90 grade overall.
Hey, Craig and I both have first round grades on him. Same here, man. We're in line, in step here on a 90. To me, this, I mean, we haven't got into a lot of them, but you can just, teams are going to be salivating over the ceiling of this kid. I mean, you could just see, even at this point, he's worlds better than what it's of any defensive tackle in this class. He's athletic. He's really got the potential to be a team's cornerstone in the interior. Really all Pro Bowl type caliber potential here. But he's a game wrecker. He's only 21. I don't think he's a day one franchise player, but he's got all the tools for whichever team can get him straight. So even though there's a little bit of concerns with the off the field stuff, which from here on out, that doesn't affect our grade at all. So we're just grading the player as he is on the field. And he is a 90 for me. I don't think it's a spoiler to say he's the best defensive tackle in this class. Jamie said he was your number one. He's probably going to be Craig and my number ones, just guessing here. But yeah, this is a good player, and I'm glad we got to a good one right off the bat.
Because there is a big drop off coming.
Oh yeah.
So let's get to it. The next one happens to be the guy that I have here on my list. And this is just kind of a consensus top 6-ish list. So in no particular order, but I have Brian Brzee out of Clemson, which is a guy I have seen mocked to the Chargers. Brzee tested really well, and a lot of that transfer to the field with a really quick get off. It's inconsistent, mind you, but when he's on time, he is gone. The speed up the line is really good too. Clemson moved him all over from 0 to wide 9. They just let him line up, use his athleticism at all spots on the line, and try to just get him to win and get some mismatches on the line. He is a gap shooter that wins with explosiveness through the hole. He's also really good at hunting for the ball carrier in the run game. What Brzee struggles with is the technical things in his game. His hands are soft in a bad way, not like he lotioned up before bedtime, but like he loses the battle with his hands with the O-lineman. And then when he gets one-on-one with a lineman, he is middle school dancing with them, like Casey and JoJo middle school type slow dancing with your O-lineman type dancing. He struggles to come off blocks. He's sticky on blockers, has a real time disengaging. And he's had an injury history, or at least been outside of I think there was a kidney issue one year, so I don't want to say an injury history, but he's been out of the Tigers lineup for 2 straight years. He just hasn't been able to consistently stay on the field for Clemson. So for me, Brian Brzee has the athleticism and position versatility that a team can bank on, but he's going to need some serious technical refinement to be an every down defender. Early on, he can add some gas to a team's pass rush inside, and they can build on it from there. But he's going to need some real technical refinement with the hands, the disengaging. I don't really think he's got a lot of pass rushing chops other than just the speed rush and shooting a gap. I don't think I didn't see much of a club, a swim, a spin. I didn't see much of that from him. I've got a low second round, high third round grade on him. It's an 80 for me on Brzee.
All right, so let's talk about Brian Taven Tillery here.
Taven Brian Tillery. Yes.
I agree with the show. I agree with pretty much everything Garrett said about him. Couple of things that he does well. He does play with his eyes in the backfield. Like Garrett said, he does a good job of locating the ball carrier coming through the gaps. He'll keep an arm free to man his gap. He's capable of setting an edge if you need him to. Good feel for finding the edges and using his hands to soften the edge. His hands aren't overly powerful. Punch isn't terribly well placed, but he is able to kind of hand fight at times on stunts and twists and find the edges of defenders and get through gaps. His hands and feet are fairly well coordinated, even though he doesn't have a ton of counters. I think, he, like Garrett said, he usually wins, does Brzee with his first step, with his athleticism. He bursts through the gap and explodes towards the ball carrier, whether it be the quarterback or the running back. He is pretty good on stunts and twists, where he uses his hands to get around the edge. Probably at his best when he's allowed to slant into gaps and charge up field. I saw a little bit of a push-pull move, a little bit of a bull rush and an arm under. Nothing great. He's pretty linear as a rusher. He can struggle with change of direction, and the rush counters are really underdeveloped. From a run defense standpoint, he flashes the ability to hold up versus double teams, but he's not great at it. He will stick to blocks. He's pretty good as a 4-eye and a 5T at setting the edge. Always has his eyes in the backfield. His motor is really high. Always fights to get upfield. And I think, to me, he's a one-gap penetrator. He's a guy who needs to play 5 technique or 4-eye and shoot the gap and get upfield and try to make plays. You don't want him manning 2 gaps. You don't want him taking on double teams. He might have some upside as an edge in an odd front, or in an even front at some point. Kind of doubtful, but maybe you can teach him some counters and help him get there. I have a high third round grade on him. We're pretty close. I'm at a 78.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Craig, and then I'll comment on Jamie. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let me first say that we had a little chat going about Brzee, and Garrett said Taven Bryant and I almost fell out of my chair because it brought me back to that year's draft cycle and the utter anxiety I felt when I thought the Chargers were going to reach for him.
Yeah.
It put me back in a really, really bad place. Almost didn't want to continue to watch him because I hated what I saw. I mean, he's not a terrible player by any means. It's just, that year was a little touch and go for me. But anyway, as a player, his athleticism's pretty decent. He can be quite quick off of the ball. It's not overly consistent. What I did notice about him is when he sees it and he like trusts what it is he sees, he's shooting himself like out of a cannon. He's straightforward, and he's one mean SOB with the mentality to get whether it's the ball carrier or the quarterback instantly. He did show a little versatility to me to play up and down the line of scrimmage, so I think he'd be an asset in both like even or odd fronts. And I mean, outside of just the on-field stuff, he's just one of those guys you want to see win. He persevered through a myriad of injuries. I think there was an ACL in there somewhere. Lost his sister, personal tragedy. I believe she had cancer. So what you know about him is that he's a mentally tough guy because, I mean, he got through all of that, still came out, performed admirably. And it looks like he's gaining some of that athleticism back that he may have lost over the course of the last few seasons due to those injuries. His hands can be active. He uses them well to shed late, I noticed. But he would use them to work his way to the ball carrier or play whatever was flushed into his area. So he's not a complete liability against the run, but I see him more as being kind of that one gapping penetrator. His feet can kind of go static against ball carriers after he engages with them. So like instead of producing consistent stalemates or negating momentum, he'll like give ground on contact. So not ideal. He also tackles high, and we want no parts of that because we have a specialist in that department at the second level already. So also not one of my favorite things about him. And, sometimes, and I notice this with a lot of these guys, as far as popping straight up out of their stance off of the line of scrimmage, instead of keeping that low man technique, getting out, firing off, they'll just stand straight up and they'll try to use their upper body strength. And a lot of times it'll cost them leverage and they'll end up being pushed back in the run game. So I can see the potential in him, especially if he keeps, the trajectory towards him gaining all of his athleticism back, him being a solid contributor at the next level. I just don't think he's going to be fantastic. And I have him with an 81 overall.
Oh, we're all pretty close.
Yeah, we're all really close.
Yeah. And Jamie, I know you saw a swim move from him and a push-pull move, but that doesn't mean it's any good. I mean, you just saw me do a club. Here's a swim over. You just saw me do that, but that doesn't mean it's NFL ready.
You gotta warn me before you do that.
I gotta see you take that, Craig. Let's go. We're only 2 players in. Spin. I can spin in my. Go ahead.
I remember thinking his push-pull was decent, at least a developable trait, something that can be built on.
Yeah.
And he won a few times with the swim. Is it great? No, but it's there, and it's something they can develop. I saw Stanley say something about he's like Phylon. No, I don't think he's like Phylon because Brizzy is built like a tight end playing defensive tackle. He's tall and long and lean and angular. Phylon was not that. I mean,
go ahead and say it, Jamie. Who is that like?
He's Tillery.
Jerry Tillery.
He's Jerry Tillery. He absolutely. You watch him. He's Tillery without the 4-sack game to pump up his value. That's what he is. He's an athlete relying on his athleticism to win, completely in lieu of any technical ability or development. And I can totally see the Chargers falling in love with him. I can
see it.
Yeah. Big program, former top recruit, very athletic. God, I hope they don't take him in the first round. He should fall based on the injuries and the lack of production. He hasn't really lived up to his prospect pedigree. But I could see the Chargers falling in love with him.
What
I can't do Taven Bryan again.
What would you do if Brzee was the pick? Obi-Wan wants to know.
Cry.
Okay.
What would you guys do?
I could cry. Yeah, no, it's with all the needs that they have, taking a position. I mean, we talked about like some of the good stuff and we love the athleticism, but man, there are such bigger needs in the first round when you've just signed SJD, you signed Austin Johnson, and you drafted Tito. You brought back Morgan Fox. That doesn't need to be taken here, and that's a tough. That would be a tough thing to swallow. If a tough pill to swallow if we got to go Brzee here.
I'll already be inebriated, so I don't know what else there is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could cry drunk cry during it.
I'm not an emotional drunk.
Drunk? No.
No.
Well, okay. Well, don't take it out on a wall or anything because you're not at home, you know?
That I can't promise.
Yeah. All right.
No throwing bottles or glasses at the TV in the sports book either.
No.
Yeah.
And the one thing I fear here, fellas, is that we didn't plan on dumping on Brzee here, but man, if they end up taking Brzee, this like 15 minutes we just spent trashing him. Oh, it's going to be played over and over.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough one. All right. Well, let's move on to happier things.
Yes.
To our next one. And can I defend myself on my my technique a little bit? I've got a boom arm here and it's right against me. So I had to back up. I got a wall behind me and small space. So it was really hard to kind of maneuver. On a football field, you'll see it a lot different, Stebbs, I promise. All right, so
coordination isn't really his thing anyway. So
well, I don't know about that. I wouldn't go that far, but okay. Lightning round 40 combine is going to be coming next year. Let's move on to our next one here, and Craig gets the pleasure of talking about Kalijah Cansey. Big topic today because he just had his pro day, blew it up. The defensive tackle on Pitt. Let's talk about him.
So most fun tape there was to watch, in my opinion. We're talking about, and you guys probably familiar with this, others maybe not. For me, the nickname's going to be Danger Mouse. I'm not talking about the musician. I mean the 80s cartoon spy character. Yeah. This is like literally, you just see sirens going off whenever you know that there's actual obvious passing down, and the offensive linemen know, and you can tell he scares the crap out of them because you can see when they're down when they're set, before the ball snapped, a lot of guys are already leaning back. They're not, aggressive in their pass set or whatever. They're looking to gain an advantage so that he doesn't beat them off of the snap of the ball and he still wins. So we're talking about like elite get off, intimidating first up quickness, ability to fit into a gap before the lineman can, again, like I said, get out of their stance and get square. And like there were instances where no matter what, even if they were in proper position and got off on time, he'd still win. He's like I said before, it's like Dennis the Menace on like obvious passing downs. You can tell like your interior offensive lineman wanted no parts of it. He takes like that. Everybody should know this, like the Super Mario invincibility star. Pass rush situations, that's him all day long. You're not going to stop him. And he's got that nonstop motor. So when you have somebody that's got elite quickness like that off of the ball, who gives that sort of effort down in and down out, it's going to be a long day for anyone that has to defend it. So if you're in a situation where, you're playing from behind, Pitt wasn't a world beater by any means, but if they build up any sort of lead whatsoever and you had to start slinging the ball, then he was licking his chops to get after the other quarterback. And, again, like I said, it's definitely going to be a long day. So on tape, he looks like he kind of warps into gaps. I can't remember what game it was. I made a note of it, but I'm not seeing it here. Literally saw him disappear in front of a guard, and he went from the right to the left side of him when I blinked. He was on one side, opened my eyes, he was on the other and shooting the gap.
Like, I remember that rep.
Yeah, I can't remember who that was.
Jumped around the guard.
Yeah.
Both feet off the ground, spun his hips, and worked around the guard before his feet hit the ground.
Yeah.
Nightcrawler. He's Nightcrawler.
There you go. There's a nickname. Better than Danger Mouse, actually. I like that, Garrett.
All right, go ahead.
So, and again, effort wise, he won't stop. Even if he's overmatched, he's going to fight through the whistle. So you have to respect that. Talking about from a productivity standpoint, 64 pressures and 19 sacks over his career at Pitt. Of course, there are some downsides. He is a hell of an inside disruptor. He's not Aaron Donald. We got to stop that comparison because he doesn't have Donald power. He might be a little quicker than Donald is, but we're talking overall package at that size. And of course, people are going to comp them. They both went to the same school. They're essentially the same height and weight. But Donald's just built differently. He's a different animal altogether. No disrespect to Cansey. He's probably just going to be a one-gapping penetrator because I'm not really sure if there's much room left for him to add weight and become more of a consistent run defender. So, his frame looks kind of maxed out to me. And I don't think he can add much more really good healthy weight that won't slow him down. Really short arms. And those are going to be a problem because he can't afford to be laid off of the ball at all. If he's not getting into an offensive lineman's pads first, there's a fair chance he's going to lose that rep. I think he's probably best suited in an even defensive front. So, he won't offer very much in the way of scheme versatility. And I just hate that he looks like a situational interior pass rusher at this point because I love the effort and the natural athletic ability, and he uses some really great technique. Just feel like as much like we're talking from a Charger standpoint, we've been dying for a real interior pass rusher. He fits that bill, but you'd have to use him in tandem and situationally, and I'm not sure if that's worth a super high draft pick. And I wouldn't put him anywhere near the first, which I've seen him mocked on multiple occasions. I don't quite get that. Mm-hmm. But for me, I have him graded at an 82.
Are you there too, Jamie? Are you at 82?
On the nose. Yeah. On the nose.
Man, this is our first one, baby. 82s all around. That's exactly the same for all three of us.
Yeah. I think what really stands out about Cansey for me is excuse me. He has a very, very advanced feel for what he does well, and he really doesn't stray from it. Like, he knows exactly who he is and what he has to do to make plays, and he leans into it, and he isn't out there trying to be somebody he's not. He has heightened awareness of what his strengths are and what he does best, understands leverage and how to attack it. He feels his man out over the course of the game and develops and alters his plan as the game goes on. So the guy, whoever's defending him, whoever's blocking him, very rarely sees the same move twice. He is a master at attacking the pocket. He demonstrated an advanced feel. One of the things that I loved about his game that I thought was an improvement from 21 to 22 was he demonstrated an advanced feel for stringing counters and moves together in 2022, which was something that he didn't do as much in 2021, but it took a huge leap forward in 2022. Nonstop motor, which you got to love. And the only real knock on him from an awareness and an IQ standpoint is that he'll sometimes lose track of the ball carrier as he's trying to get upfield. He's so urgent in his attempts to get upfield that he'll forget to track the ball carrier. There's a club move, there's a swim move, there's a push-pull move, and a spin move to get home. The feet are lightning quick. The hips are oily and twitchy. We talked about that rep. I forget who it was against, but he literally jumped from gap to gap. His hips flipped before he hit the ground, and he was basically, it was like a cartoon. He was basically like his feet were going, and he was running before both feet hit the ground, and he was gone. He'd be really good in stunts and twists. He's a guy that doesn't have to be schemed to the quarterback, but if you help him by scheming him, oh man, he's going to be even that much better. If you lunge at him, forget about it. He's either gone or he's going to pull you off balance and throw you to the ground. He can bend and flatten the edge almost like an edge does. He has, I would say, for this particular class, he has elite bend. From a run defense standpoint, he's a productive run defender. Craig mentioned it. Tons of TFLs to go along with his sacks. He's really able to slant and leap from gap to gap, like I mentioned. He understands how to deconstruct and shed blocks, plays through the whistle, consistently disrupts and shuts down running play in his gap, has to play in. I think he has to play in a one gap system. I don't think you want him manning two gaps because of his lack of length. He's really not built to stand up to double teams. He can get engulfed by larger linemen. Let's see, what else do we have here? Hands are super violent. I mentioned the moves that he uses. Elite get off. I think he has the highest get off of anybody in this class in terms of the defensive tackles. Basically, it's almost perfect. It's amazing. And he finishes when he's in the vicinity and has a chance to make a play. He has the change of direction and the short area quickness and the burst to close and tackle. The lack of length doesn't seem to affect him in terms of finishing, which is fun to watch. The length is going to hold him back from an evaluation standpoint at the NFL. His arms are less than 31 inches long, fewer than 31 inches long. And that is very, very short. You usually want your defensive tackles to be somewhere in the 33 to 34 inch range. He is 2 to 3 inches shorter than what most teams are going to want. So that's going to hold him back. And the frame, like Craig mentioned, he is pretty much maxed out. He's not going to put on a whole lot more weight without affecting his play style. So I think some of that might help push him down the board a little bit because teams are going to have a hard time. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Finding the right fit for a guy of his size. He's not an edge. He's not a defensive tackle. He's just a playmaker. Who did we say that about this free agent season? Morgan Fox. He's a better athlete than Fox, and he bends better than Fox, but their play styles are similar and they win in the same ways. And like I said, if you scheme this guy to the quarterback, he is a nightmare. He played all up and down the line. 1 technique, 0 technique, 3 technique, 4-eye, 5T. I think he could be really successful as a wide 9. I like him, like Craig said, in a one gap system. I think he could have some success as a 3 technique in pass rush sets, and you might even see him have some successes that end in NASCAR packages. I have an 82 on him. Yeah. Which is probably going to wind up being like a mid to late first round grade in this class.
Well, at least in your top. Yeah. So yeah, nothing really to add here. I mean, the only thing I want to highlight is that his get off the line of scrimmage. It is incredible. And Craig talked about the star in Mario. It like when he gets off the line of scrimmage, he's shot out of a cannon. It feels like Bullet Bill from Mario, where he's just shot out. Nobody has a chance in the offensive line when he gets that timing down. I love the way he uses his low center of gravity. So to me, it's what Jamie said. And I was going to mention, he's not quite an edge. He's not quite a defensive tackle, but he's a game wrecker. Let him shoot gaps, lean on his technique to win. The size is going to be a downfall in terms of his draft stock, but he's a disruptor even at his size. So I've got an 82 as well. I don't know that I can get with the Chargers drafting him there at 21. How are you? I would wait for a defensive tackle later. You guys, how would you feel? I mean, I'd be happy because I like the player, but I think it's too rich.
I agree. I think it's too rich. I guess you don't know how the board falls. If he's the guy, you'd probably prefer to see them trade back. But I think there are bigger needs and better players at positions of need that they can get at 21. So a little rich.
Yeah.
Jamie pretty much hit the nail on the head is what I was going to say there. He falls into that category of guys that I wouldn't hate if they drafted, if that came alongside of trading back and picking up additional picks. I wouldn't sacrifice taking him and reaching early for him for a position that I know technically not supposed to draft for need, but there are guys that probably will be available and the potential for others that could fall in positions that the Chargers could utilize on a more regulatory basis down in and down out. So wouldn't take him at 21. If they trade back, fine. If he were to fall somehow late to the second round for some ungodly reason, then I wouldn't hate that either.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Our next defensive tackle here is Jamie's. It is Siaki Ika.
Oh, sorry. My bad. So Siaki.
That was about the player, not.
Yeah, that was about the player, not about the show.
Okay.
I mean, Ika, I'm not going to go into huge detail on this guy. He is mid to late day 3 pick, in my opinion. He's a guy who is a 1.5 gap run stuffer. Not a lot of bend, not a lot of juice. The hands are okay. He will eat up double teams. He will finish plays as long as they're right in front of him. Doesn't have a lot of short area quickness or lateral agility. So leaping from gap to gap isn't really his thing, and adjusting his rush plan or, tackling guys as they cut in front of him is not his thing either. He's a space eater, a block eater. That's all he is. He might on occasion push the pocket a little bit. It's not going to be his thing. He's not going to be a guy who racks up 4 or 5 sacks from the middle of the defense. He's a younger version of Braden Fehoko. I mean, he's a useful run stuffer, and that's about it. He's not very good, not very fun to watch, and I'd be shocked if he goes before the 4th or 5th round in the draft.
What's your grade?
57.
Woo-wee. All right, Craig.
Yeah, it's not stand on ceremony here. I'll get straight to it. This was the least enjoyable tape that I watched. Couldn't wait till it was over, but had to give him a fair run. So may even sound a little bit redundant. He's this huge mass in the middle of the line of scrimmage that when he wins, it has more so to do with the fact that he's wide as hell as opposed to him being very good and making anything work. I will give him this, so I'll shoot the dude a little bit of bail. He showed better movement than what I anticipated based kind of solely on his size profile. I mean, nothing laterally, just, I'd say maneuvering from left to right in a phone booth, he isn't horrible. So I'm not sure if that's an overall compliment, but I'm just, had to find something. So one other thing that I noticed that he did is he kind of has, actually has a pretty decent feel for understanding how to affect passing lanes by shedding and get his hands up in the QB's line of sight to kind of knock down balls. So, I mean, that's great. Other than that, that's pretty much it. I mean, he's an interior. He's a nose tackle. He's just an old school regulatory nose tackle, nothing flashy. He'll eat blocks. He'll keep your linebackers clean. You probably want him in an odd front, manning the middle of the field, line of scrimmage, and hunkering down against double teams, things like that. You just want him to occupy space. That's what his body is made for. That's what his athleticism or lack thereof is more catered to. He serves a purpose. He would help if you have linebackers that aren't great at shedding blocks. Hint, hint. So I mean, that helps. But outside of that, he's just not a valuable piece in a league where the passing game dominates. So with that being said, taking all that into consideration, I gave him a 62.
Yeah. So we're about 2 points off. I gave him a 60. And yeah, I mean, for entertainment's sake, I mean, we got the Mario movie coming out. We made Mario references earlier. Just because I don't want to reiterate what you're saying. It's like that Womp Mario guy when you're playing Mario Party or Mario. He's the big stone dude with the arms and legs attached.
Yeah.
He's that slow. He takes up a bunch of room and basically has the same range. Because in Mario Party, when you hit him, all he does is turn. He can't walk anywhere. That's his range. He's slow. He is an A-gap clogger. You don't want to see him on the field more than 50% of the time with his athletic limitations, lack of pass rush. Just let him rotate in on running downs. Stanley, a Womp is the thing that drops down. The Womp Mario is the guy with the arms and legs. But so, yeah, I mean, he could push a pocket maybe. He could just be in the way and fill a gap. I've got a 60 on him, which is a low 4th, high 5th. And that's it. That's my Mario comp, and maybe we can keep this bit going. Let's move on to Mozzie Smith, who is a little bit better watch. He's the defensive tackle out of Michigan. So Mozzie has the size and quickness, which to me is NFL ready. Very athletic for a 6'3", 323-pound defensive lineman. Shows really nice leverage when attacking a lineman. as a run defender, can take on a double team, shows the power in his hands to disengage. As a pass rusher, he can collapse a pocket. Didn't show a ton of pass rush moves in my mind. The biggest issue for me is his get off. He is absolutely the last person to engage. It's always a step and a half late in my mind. He seems, once he engages, he can win with speed, but he's always what feels like a full second behind everybody else on the line. He was always the last person to engage, last person to get hands on, and his range is from tackle to tackle. He can get from side to side. If he gets outside the hash marks, in my mind, he starts to lose pursuit and he gives up on it. Also last year, just in terms of some red flags that I know teams will probably talk about, he pled guilty to a misdemeanor gun charge last year. I'm sure teams have already flagged it. But to me, Mazi Smith has the athletic profile, size, strength to develop into a starting D lineman, which is going to get him drafted high, but he's going to have to improve his quickness off the snap. That way he can unlock that athleticism a little more, in my mind. So I think there's some upside here. He'll need to work on some pass rushing chops as well. Once he does, I think it could be a nice addition to a D line down the road. He's got a 72 from me, which is a low third. A guy that I could see some potential with right now. I think there's some rawness to him, but you got to like the athleticism and the quickness paired with the size. Oh, Jamie, you're muted if you're trying to talk. Yeah, go ahead, Craig, since he's...
Oh, okay, cool. So he's got a lot of tools that could work. They just didn't consistently work at Michigan. You can see it all there. Just kind of like Garrett mentioned, I didn't love the fact that he was consistently late off of the ball. I don't know what that's about. He looks like he has the athletic ability. It just seems like he just wasn't interested in whether it was attempting to time a snap or just beating whoever was in front of him off of the ball. I guess he just assumed that maybe he could out-athlete them and beat them post-snap, or, maybe with some sort of counter. Don't really know. But he was one of the top players on Bruce Feldman's annual freak list going into last season. He shows a little bit of that athleticism on tape, and I think his functional strength kind of matches up with what he put on display at the combine and the bench. I think he had, 30 plus reps at 2.25. So I saw that on tape. He may have the best overall blend of size and athleticism in the class, and I think he's a top tier mover laterally. It's just kind of depressing to see the athleticism show up, but the fact that he seems like he's always playing from behind, so you don't really get to see it on full display at the snap of the ball. I really like his ability and willingness to two gap, and his pursuit angles against like stretch and outside zone plays is pretty good. He held his own for the most part when anchoring against double teams, and he's got the upside of a really good interior pass rusher. The juice is there. He's just got to get better with timing. Outside of that, as far as some of the other things that he can work on, I think right now he's probably just like a better athlete than an overall football player. The effort isn't always there, especially if he doesn't win with his initial rush moves. He'll just kind of concede the rep and half-heartedly like hand fight with guards and centers. And he's got some really unimpressive production from a guy who was touted so highly. Before I actually watched him, I heard his name over and over and over again during the year, and I expected to see more on film. But he had 33 pressures over his 3 years and only 2 sacks, something nuts like that. And dude's just not a finisher. And I would imagine that didn't make him very popular with the ladies. But at the end of the day, he's got stuff. He got stuff there. It can be developed. I do kind of sort of question the passion. I hate doing that because you can't get inside of a guy's heart and see what it is he's made of. It's just that on tape, it seemed like sometimes he seemed very disinterested. That said, as far as the grade goes, I have him at a 75.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was the Siaki Ika effect or if it was actually Mazi himself, but I kind of like Mazi. I'm in a similar boat to you guys. I think there are traits there that can be developed, and I think he was misused as a nose tackle in the Michigan defense. I think if you took Mozzie and you had him slim down a little bit, maybe had him play a little bit closer to 315, something like that, I think you would help. I think he would gain some athleticism, and I think you would see a big spike in his pass rush production. I thought his ability to access the pocket really grew and improved from 2021 to 2022. You can see the quick feet. He's got really strong, heavy hands. He blows guys up with his hands on a consistent basis. He's able to slide through gaps. He's able to find edges of defenders. He can handle double teams. I don't really love him in that role. I felt like he was getting moved off the ball a lot. There wasn't a lot of TFL production for him. Most of his tackles were in like the 2 to 3 yard range because he was getting moved off the ball a lot. I think his sack production jumped from like 2 sacks to 4.5 sacks this year. I could be wrong, but I think that was a number that I came up with. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is this him? I thought he had a lot of pressures, but I might be confusing him with somebody else. But anyway, I think you can have Mozzie Smith play a 3 technique. If he slims down, he maybe even be successful as a 5 technique. I kind of look at him and think maybe something along the lines of like a developmental Akeem Hicks in terms of being able to play 4 technique, 5 technique, be long, be strong, and actually have some quickness to get through the gaps. So I liked him. I'm at a 70. I feel like he's a good developmental interior rusher. And he's a guy who I think somebody's going to be happy with when they get him in the building, as long as they don't just limit him to being a space eater, which I feel like he was kind of miscast as in Michigan. Okay.
So if Ika's a womp, what are we saying here? Correct. Anybody got to me, I got one already. I've been thinking while you guys are doing it. This is like Chain Chomp. That dude, when you're playing Mario Kart and you're driving by and it's sleeping, like he's always a second late, but you could drive right by him. But when he takes off, man, he's fast. And also he doesn't have a big range, which I don't think Mozzie Smith has. He's like tackle in my mind. So to me, I got a Chain Chomp reference for Mozzie Smith. If anybody else has got anything better, go for it. But let's keep running this bit, man.
You put me to shame. I can't remember all these. Like when you said it, now that you say it, I know exactly who it is. But the name escaped me initially, and then when you started describing them, I know exactly who that is.
Yeah, all right. Because LJ Carter was saying he's like Wario, but I wouldn't. I don't think that's a real good comp. We don't usually like doing comps during draft season, but these are the ones we can make.
So who's the princess then? Is it Brezzy?
It's just Pete. Yeah, because somebody put a draft profile in here, and it was like it was from Bucky Brooks. Sam G put it in. Brzez's got ballerina-like feet, so Princess Peach, I guess, would fit pretty well there.
We don't make the rules.
That's just where we're at now. The Mario themed podcast is gained traction, and we're moving. All right, last one here. This one's for Craig. This is Adi Tamiwa Adi Bare, and we will not have to pronounce that again. We'll go by Tommy. He's out of Northwestern. Let's talk about him.
All right, so this one was fun. I really liked his aggressiveness and nastiness setting the edge, but along with keeping a really, really wide base. And you can see the versatility. He can be a 3 tech, a 4-eye, a 5T day one. Roll him out there and just let him do his thing. You like his explosiveness and that athleticism. Dude ran a 4.49 at the combine, and that is what the kids, I believe, these days called sliding. 37.5-inch vert, 10.5-inch broad. So yeah, there you go. Make a note. Sliding. That means you're moving. So it's what I was told, at least.
Okay.
He's kind of got the perfect build that gives him like almost an unfair advantage to gain leverage on the inside. And he's not just really athletically gifted, but he matches it with the effort for the most part. He's really good laterally. He uses that mobility well to avoid reach blocks. And I think this could be a guy that in 3 years is playing at potentially a tier 1 level. There's a lot of meat left on the bone. Pause. I know somebody's going to get me for that. And just with regard to development, there's a whole lot that can be molded. So in regards to like the production, I want to say he had over 3 years, 53 pressures and 13 sacks at Northwestern. So there's a lot to work with there, and he could stand to put on a little bit of weight. I think he's pretty good against the run as it is, but if he can bulk up a little bit, I don't think it's going to slow him down a ton. I mean, a guy that's running 4.4 puts on a couple more pounds of muscle, still 4.5 dude as interior rusher, or can play a little bit of edge. I wouldn't really put him on the outside though, because he looks super unnatural. Which is going to lead me to my next point. He's a little tweenish size wise. So if he stays in like the 280s, I definitely want him to at least add like at least a couple pounds of muscle to get stronger in his lower half, because I'm not totally sold on his ability to anchor for 4 quarters. He played some edge at Northwestern, but he isn't really bendy at all. He sort of looks out of place, but I think they use the fact that he has that athleticism and wanted to use it to their advantage. And also to have that sort of size on the edge and be able to move the way that he does, seemed like it was worth a shot. Didn't always look pretty, but there were some instances where it worked to his advantage. He wasn't as good a finisher as I would have liked to have seen. There were a few plays that resulted in resulted in TFLs, but were extended instead. And sometimes he looks like he's just satisfied. Again, patty cake's a theme, like hand fighting with defenders as opposed to shedding them to make a play. He hasn't mastered attacking half the man when playing on the edge, because like I said before, he isn't a natural outside guy. So his technique needs to be almost flawless more often than not when he's lined up on the outside. And I don't love him against double teams because he doesn't always play with the most disciplined pad level. And there were occasions where he got smoked. So it wasn't always pretty. With that said, I like him. I think there's a whole lot to work with there. The athleticism is top notch. It's blue chip. And I gave him a 72.
Okay. Jamie, where are you at with him?
I'm in a similar ballpark. I'm a tiny bit higher, but really close. I think the awareness is pretty average. He can be pulled out of position by misdirection and window dressing. He'll over pursue the mesh point at times. He just wants to get upfield. So if you let him get upfield, you can run right underneath him, because there isn't really a plan and he's not really aware of what's going on once he gets upfield. A highly productive interior pass rusher, had 5 sacks and 31 pressures. I think he was top 25 among Power 5 defensive tackles in terms of pressures and run stops. He had 27 run stops in 2022. Pad level will start out good early in the rep. If he doesn't win right away, it'll drift high and he can get stuck on blockers. Change of direction, flattening the edges, things like that, not really his thing. Pretty much a linear rusher for the most part. He does have some short area quickness, but it's not great. He has very strong hands, violent. He'll jolt blockers with his hands, and he can pull guys off balance if they're leaning on him. Let's see. Really quick first step. Solid finisher in the run game. The tight hips make it hard for him to change direction once a play gets outside of his frame. He'll allow the offensive lineman to run him around the QB and can have a hard time bending or changing direction, like Craig said. I think the lack of length makes him better suited to play inside, and the bend is pretty average. He played pretty much all over the line. 3T, 4I, 4T, 5T, all over the place. Even played some 6 technique. I think he's a rotational 3 technique at the next level. Basically a situational pass rush specialist. I think he can develop into a starter if he adds some muscle, bulks up a little bit, and works on the counters. I'm at a 74, which is a mid to late 3rd round grade.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we're pretty much in the ballpark. I have a 70 on him, but I mean, he could really play anywhere, and he does it the majority of his reps with his hand in the dirt. So I do think he will play inside. I think 3-tech's probably a good spot. He's got the frame to play inside, can rotate outside in certain packages if you wanted to. He's got a real sharp first step, fires off the line of scrimmage, digs in the run game, impressive anchor. I mean, my favorite thing is his arms. He uses his length to separate himself in the run game, has a nice swim move to push aside blockers, also gains leverage at the point of attack with those arms, and then gets those arms and passing lanes. He's constantly getting him up and getting a lot of deflected balls when he doesn't get home to the quarterback. So very active hands, which is great. He's an athlete that is physical in the run game, can run and chase, need to work on some pass rushing moves. I was a little let down. I thought he would have a little bit more, playing a little bit more on the edge. But he's probably further along more than a lot of these other interior defensive linemen, to be honest with you. So even though he doesn't have the complete toolbox yet, he's got enough that separates himself from this class. So I would say add some weight so he can hold up inside, play some 3-tech. I got a 70 on him. My Mario comp is going to be Waluigi. He's got the long arms. He's not quite Luigi because Tommy's not quite an edge, not quite an inside guy. He's kind of a tweener. Also, when you play Mario Tennis, he's got that. His special move is the ball bounces around all of the court, and that kind of seems like what he does at the line of scrimmage. So I will go with Waluigi here for Adi Tamiwa Adibare, which I want to get out one more time because I learned how to say his name all day today.
Good on you.
So let's move on to these sleepers. So let's each give one, and let's talk about some guys that we want to give a shout out to. I'll go ahead and start, and then we'll just go down the line. My first here is my sleeper here is Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin. Has the size of a nose, 6'4", 309, plays with the athleticism of an end. He's got massive lower half to anchor in the run game. He redirects blockers. He's got the flexibility to shoot gaps, bend, and stretch out run plays. His hands are really active at the line of scrimmage. And as a pass rusher, I loved his swim move and club move. They were particularly good. Benton is a guy that you can see makes a leap every single year. Every year that I watched this guy, he got better and better, and he was really sharp in the Senior Bowl, so he's even extending it past this season. He didn't really stuff the stat sheet, so he's isn't a guy that's got a ton of stats that he can lean on. He did get 4.5 sacks and 10 tackles for loss this past season, so he's a guy that you could see that's climbing and ascending in his progression. And the other red flag for me is or red flag, but some issue that he'll need to fix or with his balance. Can get off balance sometimes. Blockers can kind of throw him off his path a little bit as well. But Keanu Benton has a pretty well-developed toolbox. He's got the frame, the hands to be an NFL starter in like year 2 or 3 in a 2-gap system. Comes from a pretty NFL-heavy system in Nebraska. He's trending upward as a pass rusher. He's already pretty stout in the run game. I like him, and a guy that I think is a real value pick later on. I've got a 71 on him, which is a low third, and a guy that I think you can later on start to develop into a starter, and I think has got some real potential. So I like Benton. Jamie, who's your guy?
That's a good one. I also had a 71 on Benton.
Oh, good. There you go.
I actually have 2. And I was looking for more late round picks, guys that can be had in day 3, who are more developmental and have particular traits that the team might look for.
Okay.
The first one is Dante Stills from West Virginia. He is a tweener. He's a guy who is really, really good on stunts and twists. He fires through the gaps. He's uber athletic, comes from an NFL family. His dad played in the NFL for 10 years. He had something like 23.5 sacks over the last 5 years, including 2 7-sack seasons. Double digits in tackles for loss every season. I think he wound up with 65 or 70 tackles for loss over the course of 5 years. He's always in the backfield. He has the bend, he has the wiggle, the short area quickness to get home. He generally finishes when he gets home. He is small. He lacks length. He plays at around 280-ish. Kind of like AA, who we just talked about. Mm-hmm. And he's a guy who probably is going to have to be a situational pass rusher, more than likely a situational 3 technique. If you're looking for somebody who maybe can step in and replace a guy like a Morgan Fox in a couple of years, he'd be a good fit for that. I mean, you can just see them moving him around the line and scheming him to the quarterback. There are some things to like. One of the reasons that he's so low, not low, but that he's more likely to be a late pick is he's he had 5 years of college. So he's a little older than most of these guys. So unlikely to be picked in the top 3 rounds. I have a 62 on him, which is a late 4th, early 5th kind of pick as a developmental interior pass rusher.
Okay. Before you get your second one, Jamie, Craig, why don't you give us yours?
Yeah. So my guy is going to be Garrett Clark out of Coastal Carolina. So my thought process here was, I know that we want more of an interior pass rush guy if we could find one to, kind of complement what the team already has in Fox. But we don't know what the deal is going to be with Otito Ogbonnia recovering from what was the injury? I forget what is it, patella. I think he blew his patella or something like that. So what Clark offers is a legit 3-4 nose tackle or 1T with the ability to collapse a pocket and create opportunities for outside rushers. It's weird because he's 6'4", 334 pounds. He's got 33 3/4 length arms. So the arms are decent length. They're not anything, ridiculous, but the guy's a pretty significant athlete. He was a former Tui high school player. He was a tight end. He's actually recruited as a tight end and played defensive line. He ended his high school campaign with 26 TDs on offense and 31 sacks. So the movement ability is there. You can see the weight gain, the size that he put on didn't completely deteriorate that. He would immediately shore up the run defense. So it's another opportunity to help your linebackers out. He's got an 82-inch wingspan, which matches the frame really well. You can get him playing a gap and a half. You can 2-gap him. It doesn't matter. He'll keep linebackers free. And getting any movement on the first level, running inside zone is going to be pretty much a chore against him. He's actually pretty explosive off the line for a true nose. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that. And over his 3 years at Coastal Carolina, I think he had 10 sacks. So if you're talking about that from an actual true nose tackle, that's not bad production at all. He's one of the guys that's not going to do anything extravagant off the line of scrimmage when it comes to actual moves. But what he does do is he will literally plant the center in the quarterback's lap. That's his thing. He'll drive guys off the ball and collapse the pocket. And so there's more than one way to affect the quarterback with interior pressure. He just doesn't finesse it. He'll just take the center and forklift him back into the QB. That's kind of his thing. It's really, if you want to look at it, kind of his calling card, honestly. So the only other negatives there is he leans really heavily on his ability to kind of power through interior offensive linemen. He was more successful than not doing just that. So he will need some technical refinement at the next level because, in the NFL, you won't be able to win just that way off of sheer power. There'll be guys that can match that. He is what he is. He's a block that you can sit in the middle of the line of scrimmage and dare a team to test it up the gut. And he needs to put in some work on his lower half. He's got less than ideal junk in the trunk, if you want to put it that way. Mm-hmm. So what I do see in him is maybe someone you can get. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a sneaky late 3rd round dude or something like that. And it's in the 3rd or 4th round and he mans the middle of a defense and you see him putting up some pretty significant numbers in regards to pressures on the interior at that size. I have him graded at a 71.
Yep. I watched Clark. Nice little bull rush. I think, he'd be a nice little addition as a 1-gapping nose. Add some deep to the defensive line rotation. Yeah, that's a pretty good day 3 guy. Jamie, who's your second dude?
My second one is Carl Brooks. Not what I was expecting at all. For some reason, I thought he was going to be, a 330-pound one technique, and that's not what I got at all. He is a hybrid interior lineman edge. He can play some 5 technique. He can play outside as a 6 technique or stand up as an outside linebacker. He is not super long, but he uses the length that he does have really well. Very heavy, violent hands. He blasts guys in the shoulder pads and knocks them off balance constantly. He has a killer bull rush. He has pretty good bend for a guy his size at 6'3", 300 pounds. He's probably going to pack on a little bit more weight and get even bigger over the next couple of years. He is a guy who accesses the pocket from the edge, from the gaps. He's a good run defender. He gets to the quarterback. He is a developmental situational pass rusher who fills both an interior and an edge need late in day 3. I have a 64 on him.
I got a 67. We're close on him. Yeah, I was surprised by him. All right, we got our rankings. Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Or I had a 69, my bad, on Brooks, 67 on Clark. All right, while you get your list together, Jamie, I'll go ahead and
I've got my list. Sorry, I was yeah.
Okay.
Ellie brought me a little present, so I was
nice.
just talking to her.
Cool. Okay. Craig, why don't you give us your top, whatever you got there on your list, whoever you watch.
Yeah. So let's go from like 7 to 1.
Okay.
So starting at the bottom, of course, Mr. Siaki Ika, the 62. At 6, got Garrett Clark, 70 with the 70 overall. I'm sorry. At 5, Tommy Adebawore with 72. At 4, we got Mozzie Smith with 75. At 3, Brian Brzee with an 81. 2, Kalijah Cansey, 82. And number 1, Mr. Jalen Carter with the 90.
All right, Jamie.
I'll give a top 9. I have Siaki Ika at number 9, bringing up the rear at 57. Dante Stills, number 8 with a 62. Carl Brooks, number 7 with a 64. Mozzie Smith, number 6 with a 71. Keanu Benton tied for 6th, also with a 71. AA with a 74. Brian Brzee, number 3 with a 78. Kalijah Cansey, number 2 with an 82. And Jalen Carter, number 1 with an 87.
All right. So I watched 10. Siaki Ika, number 10. I watched that USC kid, Thule. He had a 65. He was going to be my sleeper, but then I decided against it. Gerard Clark, 67 at 8. Carl Brooks with a 69 at 7. Adi Tamiwa Adebawore with a 70 at 6. Mozzie Smith with a 70 at 5. Keanu Benton at 71 at 4. Brian Brzee at 3 with an 80, which means Kalijah Cansey has an 82 at number 2, and then Jalen Carter with a 90 at number 1. So that'll do it. We're done with interior defensive linemen. Our next one is, what is it? It is running backs and tight ends. We got 2 groups. We'll talk about that next week. We appreciate you guys, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.